Good morning, everybody. My name is Marcia van der Vlucht and I will be your host today. I'd like to welcome you to this session about the implementation of the territorial agenda in the Dutch-Flemish cross-border region of the North Sea Port District. Around a year ago, we also had a novi conference and we had a session about the linkages between our national strategy for the environment, for spatial planning and the environment, and the territorial agenda 2030. As said then, the priorities in the territorial agenda are addressed in the Dutch National Strategy for Spatial Planning and the Environment. This year's conference is about the execution of that strategy, our novi. The novi is accompanied by an implementation agenda, which explains how national government will fulfill its role in implementing novi plans. The implementation agenda will, for example, include an overview of instruments and area-specific programs in various fields of policy. In this session, we will talk about one of these specific areas, a novi area, and it's a cross-border functional area. We will touch upon several topics which will be recognized from the territorial agenda, such as cooperation and coordination between places, levels of government, policy sectors and societal groups to address complex issues and utilize diverse potential. The priorities such as functional regions, integration beyond borders, healthy environment, sustainable connections and circular economy are all discussed within the framework of the region. And I would now like to go towards our guests, because we have two guests to inform you about the instruments that are used in the regions that might also be of interest to you. And we will go to the table right now. So, good morning, gentlemen. Everybody, I'd like to introduce to you Sebastian Hupkes. He is our advisor on cross-border cooperation within the Ministry of Interior and Kingdom Relations, and of course Leo van den Brand, specialist for housing and planning within the province of Zeeland. They both cooperate to utilize the opportunities that the area we will be discussing today provide. And I feel it is a very special area, Sebastian. So you work for the ministry, so this is not the only area in which you work and in which you see cross-border cooperation. Could you please explain to me why this project is special and what makes it special for you?
Yes, I can, Marcia, thank you very much. This area is very specific because the cross-border cooperation is very intensive, with a lot of topics, meaningful topics, from energy, from housing, from people, from living. And besides that, the people, the institutions, the businesses are very enthusiastic to jointly work on this agenda they have put forward there. And that makes me enthusiastic as well.
Well, that sounds very good. And Leo, to ask you a similar question, Sebastian just told us that there are a lot of different actors cooperating. You, of course, as somebody working for the province of Zeeland, is very much in the midst of this cooperation. Could you please tell me how is this cooperation functioning? Does it work? What works and why?
Well, it really works. And as Sebastian was saying, it works because of the intensity of the cooperation, but also because there is a lot of commitment from all parties, from all different levels of government, national governments on both sides of the border, but also the provinces and the towns and the municipalities who participate, and the port authorities themselves. They're all involved and they're all really committed to bring this thing together, to intensify this cooperation and to try to achieve the goals that we've put for ourselves.
Okay, so that made me, I hope it made all of you on the other side of the screens somewhere in our digital gateway enthusiastic as well. I'd like to hear more, but before we go to the presentation, I'd like to tell everybody at home or in the office, home office, wherever you are, you can ask questions. And after the presentation of the two gentlemen, I will go through the questions and ask them to our specialists. Hopefully we can answer all the questions, but I will try to group some questions if they touch upon the same topic. So, Leo, could I ask you to start presenting for us, please?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Leo van der Brand. Marcia has already introduced both me and Sebastian. For this presentation, we'll focus on, first of all, the North Sea Port District, the area itself, as an example of cross-border cooperation and of a novi area. And the second issue will be the instruments that we use, in particular some of the instruments on cooperation that the Benelux has provided, to try to really tackle the issues that we are dealing with. But first of all, let me show you where you can find the area which we are discussing now, the location of North Sea Port and its surrounding district. We'll zoom on it so you'll have an idea of where we are located, right in the heart of northwestern Europe. The port itself is a large and strong international port. It's, in terms of added value, it's the third port of Europe. With 130 million tons of shipping last year, it's slowly recovering from the Corona period. There's a large number of companies, 550 in total, including large international companies such as Dow Chemical, Cargill, Volvo, Damen shipyards, and other ones. And total area is 9,100 hectares. It employs 100,000 people, and there's currently the construction going on of the third largest lock worldwide for the entrance of the canal between the North Sea and Ghent. This area in the past consisted of two port areas, one in Zeeland and one in Flanders, the port of Ghent. And these two ports have merged in 2018 to become one company, one international port across the border. It covers the whole of the Ghent area, the metropolitan area of Ghent, and a part of Zeeland. And it is a publicly owned a port. It's owned by the municipalities which are covering the area of the port, as well as the two provinces, Zeeland and East Flanders in Belgium. These are shareholders. These are the only shareholders. So these shareholders jointly decided shortly after the merger, started the process of becoming a Benelux territorial corporation. This process has been finalized in 2021, and it enables us to strengthen our cooperation within the area and to jointly make decisions and try to reach the objectives that we've put ourselves. Sebastian will go into this subject a bit more later on. The whole area has been nominated or appointed as one of the 8 novi areas in the Netherlands, an area of national importance because of its importance as an economic area and as an area which has a great impact on the national objectives in terms of energy, CO2 reduction, and others. Here I will pass on to Sebastian.
Good morning from me as well. I want to emphasize first of all a few general remarks about cross-border cooperation and then go into a little bit more detail about the instruments of cooperation and removing obstacles in this specific area with Benelux instruments. First of all, you see here the cross-border areas of the Netherlands and Flanders, and again, location of the North Sea port districts and the port. And generally speaking, it's good to remember that the cross-border perspective is that from the Netherlands and Flanders, the social and life is very much intertwined. The border between Belgium and the Netherlands is from 1830, and we share the same language, albeit with some cultural differences. However, most of our life is still very much national-oriented, so cross-border cooperation is a lot to be gained with. Secondly, we see that cross-border intensifies. North Sea Port is a very good example of this. Cross-border cooperation intensifies is very good because it gives us more opportunities and chances to discover on the other side of the border for healthcare, for living, for energy, etc. In North Sea Port, this is very much the case. Stimulating cross-border cooperation has a downside, however. If you do this, you notice that there are more obstacles are perceived. I call this the paradox of cross-border cooperation. We stimulate it, but doing nothing is actually much more easier. Stimulating cross-border, like North Sea Port District, creates obstacles that are otherwise not perceived. And maybe it's good to give a few examples of this. If you cross the border between the Netherlands and Flanders, you hardly notice it. It's easy to pass the border, but legal systems do not. The border separates our national legal systems, and they all separate our public institutions. Maybe a few examples specifically noticeable in North Sea Port. A lot of employers and workforce work on both sides on the borders. They live in Belgium and work in the Netherlands or vice versa. That means these people have to deal with different income tax and social security. And these things change all the time. It depends on where you work. You have to have some administrative burdens in order to avoid double income taxing, etc., etc. There are rules and regulations to avoid this, but it is quite difficult and complex. And this forms a border. Specifically when this workforce needs to be working at home, then a change in regime can happen. And we all work on that, but we might try to tackle these obstacles a little bit more and a little bit better to enhance this further cooperation in this district. Secondly, another example, this is a port. And in a port, liquid waste from ships need to be processed. Within a port authority like Rotterdam, a border does not need to be changed. But if you are a ship in Ghent, then the plant for liquid waste is on the Dutch side. Then you have to ask for a permit to do this. And this is an obstacle that is not there in national ports. So these examples seem very specific. But for this area, it is very important to tackle these because they undermine the development of this area. That also gives an obligation for central governments to help because a lot of these obstacles are because laws and regulations differ between Belgium, Flanders on one side and the Netherlands on the other side. And the responsibility for these rules often lies with national governments. But the obligation for central government to be involved is maybe much more important because we need, from a national perspective, this cooperation in these border areas. We need them to achieve our national goals. How? To achieve the transition of green energy, reduction of CO2, sufficient housing, all other kinds of national goals such as nitrogen. They can only be helped with if we cooperate good in this area with great many companies and people who live there. So In order to have a much more detailed view of the agenda, I will give now the word again to my colleague, Leo.
Thank you, Sebastian. I will go in a bit more detail into the objectives of the North Sea Port District, and this is meant to illustrate to you why cross-border cooperations in these kind of objectives is not just is an absolute necessity in order to achieve these objectives. 5 objectives that we have identified are closely resemble the general objectives of the territorial agenda, EU territorial agenda. They deal with renewable energy and circular economy, with corridors and connections cross-border, with living conditions across the border, with health and environment, and with the functional ways of governance. I'll give a few examples. I'll not go into much detail with all of them, but renewable energy and circular economy is very important in this industrial area, which uses a lot of energy, which has a great energy demand, is very important also in its carbon dioxide emission, and these are problems that we have to tackle. Try to make use of the landing of offshore wind power in order to make our industry greener, more sustainable, and making more use of sustainable hydrogen production in the area. Same goes for the reuse and exchange of industrial waste and residues, which Sebastian has already given an example of how complicated that can be when you work in a cross-border area. Second example is cross-border corridors and sustainable connections. A very important one which we're working now on is a 380 kilovolt high power line, which has to connect both the offshore wind power to the region, but also across the border towards Belgium, in order to make optimal use of this energy production. And other important, there are logistic connections, and there's also an important, great need for a train link for goods, but also good public transport connections across the border, which are now almost absent. It's very complicated to travel by public transport across the border. Integration in the whole area in living conditions, health and working across the border. Sebastian has already given an example of the problems that you encounter if you work across the border, but housing is a very important issue. The Ghent metropolitan area is very densely populated and has really difficulties in finding adequate housing for its inhabitants, for the people who work in the district, while on the part of Zeeland across the border, there is still ample space for housing development, for improving the towns and villages, and but in order to make use of that opportunity, we really have to cooperate to try to coordinate our spatial planning across the border and see how we can make use of the whole area, of the area as a whole. We are also working on trying to increase our joint, or increase the knowledge, or increase the use also of the joint cultural heritage that goes back centuries, but really has been disconnected because of the different because of the borders. And the healthy environment is obviously very important also from an EU perspective on nature and the nature objectives that are to be achieved in the region. There needs to be a lot more cross-border cooperation on goals and on implementation of nature development and activities related to biodiversity, but also trying to make the whole area more resilient in terms of climatic change. The last issue will be the government issue, for which I will again turn to Sebastian.
Thank you very much, Leo. The final objective is functional regions and governance. I want to make a few points here. How to cope with cross-border obstacles, how to enhance the cooperation by using a BGTC instrument, go into that a little bit further, and how to involve central government, the reason why we have a novi area here. National governments need to be in the game. How can we facilitate this? What are the instruments? It's good to remember that Belgium and the Netherlands, together with Luxembourg, form the Benelux Union. And the focus of this union is specifically on strengthening and deepening the cross-border cooperation at all levels of governments. Consequently, the Benelux Union is also working on solving legal and other obstacles in specific areas of the border region. Now, I want to give you a few examples of how different possible Benelux solutions can help tackle cross-border obstacles. This might give you some perspective on how we deal with these issues across the total border area of Flanders and the Netherlands. It's also usable in some parts in North Seaport. The Benelux can make regulations, decisions, and in doing so solve legal obstacles such as, for instance, noise level in cross-border areas. They are nationally determined. For cross-border business parks, a Benelux decision made it possible to determine uniform levels for a cross-border industrial park, and by modulating the implementation of the unchanged national legislation. So for this specific area, we have a set of noise levels which are applicable for this area only. Another point is recognition of certain professional qualifications. That's of course not only for the border areas but has national implications, but for instance for sea trade, etc. They have wide usage in border areas. Furthermore, also for ambulance transport that is specifically usable in border areas, and the use of priority signals. It's differently used in Belgium and the Netherlands, so we try to tackle these things via Benelux solutions, but also for freight transport, large and heavy trucks, sea containers. We have different rules in Belgium and the Netherlands, and we try using Benelux solutions to solve this, and it has been solved. Finally, I made an example here of groundwater extraction. Groundwater extraction close to the border also has, of course, effects on the other side of the border. And so how we deal with that? Planning, licensing, damage composition in border region specific, also Benelux regulations help. Finally, Benelux can also make recommendations, not legally binding, but they have moral authority. And the implementation is subject to monitoring. This might help us, and has been helpful in, for instance, helping to determine border crossing points for pipelines, but also for a consultation structure in the field of spatial planning. We have the VLANet structure for that. That is the focus on how we try to help all different kinds of obstacles that we might run into now and in the future. We closely cooperate with the Benelux and helping to try to tackle these things. But more importantly is maybe how can we create cooperation structures in the region themselves? What instruments do we have? One of the instruments to help to address the territorial agenda in cross-border areas in the Benelux is a tool called Benelux Groupings for Territorial Cooperation, BGTC. North Sea Port District is such a thing. And it helps the participation of local regional authorities on both sides of the border, but also central government and other public institutions. A BGTC is a formal cross-border partnership. It has also legal personality, so it can hire staff, open a bank account. And it is possible within the BGTC to transfer regulatory powers to this BGTC from the participants. So BGTC can make it possible to make to take legally binding decisions towards its citizens and businesses. They cannot, of course, be not more powers transferred than the participants have. This is similar to the EGTC, the European Grouping of Territorial Cooperation, in which the complete EU can use. It is, in my point of view, a little bit more flexible because no national authority has to be consulted or needs authorization from, and it makes it possible to transfer regulatory powers. Where can we use BGTC for? It can be used for all kinds of things. What we try to solve cross-border, like waste collection and processing, or spatial planning and issuing permits might also be the case for using this instrument in the future. Or, as been done in North Sea Port, by implementing a broad cross-border agenda for housing, urban development, energy, etc., the points my colleague Leo addressed. North Sea Port is a BGTC but had not yet have regulatory powers. Now the question is, can this instrument also be used wider in Europe to tackle territorial agendas in your area? France and Germany may decide to join the BGTC treaty. That is stipulated in the treaty itself. These governments must decide it themselves. Otherwise, I think it's necessary, if we want to use this wider range of a BGTC, to enhance the European Grouping of Territorial Cooperation instrument within the European Union. But finally, it's most important to know that you cannot easily copy-paste what we try to do in North Sea Port to other areas or cross-border areas in Europe. Every border region has its own characteristics. You need to have a broad analysis of the region first. Governments, local, regional and national, must be willing to invest in people and in means. And please remember also that we are working in North Sea Port, but it is still work in progress. In fact, the matter is we actually just started. So we will maybe later on come back in a next event to give a more detailed analysis of the future developments. But this is our presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. Everybody on the other side of the screen, please ask your questions if you have any, and we would also like to hear about projects you might have, instruments you might use, which might be useful for other users, and any insights you can give us to your projects. Sebastian and Leo, we are now here, but we don't see the Flemish colleagues, and you do talk about cross-border cooperation. Could you please explain?
Well, our Flemish colleagues was planning to join us in this presentation as well, but unfortunately at a very late stage he had to do something else, but it's no matter, we can help him. Everything we just said here is actually cross-border. I think it's I can safely say, Leo, that about 50% of the investment in the people, in the authorities, is Flemish and 50% is Dutch. So don't be mistaken that there are only 2 Dutch people here.
Yeah.
It is cross-border.
It is an actual cross-border. So that means the area is addressed as a functional area, so to speak, in also European terms. And that does give me, leads me to the question, it also involves, as I've heard in your presentation, involves different sectors. And how is the cooperation between different sectors? And also, how is it weighed between objectives? Because of course, it's already hard, as everybody knows, within a home, within a family, to meet each other in the middle and say, okay, that's your goal, but that's my goal, and we have to arrange that. So it's already hard in a municipality, a province, nationally, but you're working cross-border, different sectors, different territorial impact. How is the decision-making done in that area?
That is very difficult because of all these sectors are also differently organized cross-border. If you want to look at the example of public transport, for example, if you look at in the Netherlands, the provinces are responsible for public transport, for buses in particular. If you look at in Flanders, it's the regional government, the Flanders government, not the province, who is mandated for that part. So you have to, in order to discuss an issue like that, you have to shift between different government levels, and that's sometimes very complicated. And that occurs. This is just an example, but it occurs on all kind of issues.
Okay.
So that you have different mandates, which are either provincial, municipal, or at the level of national governments.
Yeah, that does sound like it would make it hard. We have a question from Norway, from our colleague Jan. Hi Jan, nice to know that you're joining us. And he's asking if we could provide any documents on the BGTC instrument. Is that possible?
Yes, we can.
Okay,
yes,
I'll make sure that it gets to you, Jan. And there's also a question. Are there any comments on the impact of the B Solution initiative of the EC plus the AEBR in the North Sea?
The B Solution is a tool from the European Community that helps to tackle or analyze different kind of cross-border issues, and within different kind of subjects we use them. For instance, the ambulance, cross-border ambulance transportation, and other things like qualification recognition. And we try to use the outcome of this research provided by the B Solutions in different areas, notably North Sea port, but also in a wider use in our border areas, in close cooperation with the European Community, but also with local and the University of Maastricht, for example, who help us closely with that.
Okay. And for me, there's another question, because we've been working on the territorial agenda for a long time, and as said, when looking at our strategy for the Netherlands, we've seen that we try to implement the priorities within our national strategy, but we also have looked into the pilot of the territorial impact analysis for this territorial agenda. And what is perceived as important is that, especially cross-border, if you make decisions on one side, the territorial impact on the other side is there, but also if you make decisions in one policy sector, there will be impact that is broader. And what are your thoughts on that? And especially also, what could we expect for as information coming forth of your project, or maybe insights we could use within that pilot? Okay. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Maybe one specific thing. Last few years we had a study to cross-border infrastructure being carried out with Flemish and Dutch universities. And next month we have a seminar because of that. And one of the most important things for realizing cross-border infrastructure is to inform each other early on the consequences and the effects of the plans we have for cross-border or national projects which have cross-border effects. And it's very important that we have on a high level and workforce level early on good effect studies put out together. That's one of the outcomes. But actually we have a seminar on this subject with people from universities, for public authorities coming together in Antwerp to discuss specifically this point connected to cross-border infrastructure. So this is one of the things that we continuously work on and try to improve from the national government point of view.
That is good, and I would really like to make sure that we somehow get the results also towards the group working on the pilot for territorial impact. And
if I may add to that, one of the more sort of baseline issues that we're trying to deal with locally, but which we also need broader assistance, is data, the use and the collection and use of data, because there are huge differences in data collection and data analysis across the border, and it's very difficult to connect these and to be able to exchange data on a data on housing, demography, all kind of data. There's a lot of differences, and it's very difficult to use each other's data because of there's a long history of how you collect data. So that's a complication, which we're working on, but we haven't solved it yet.
that is very interesting, because I always feel that whenever we look at the different researchers within the ESPON program, for instance, we also always talk about at what level is the data used and how can we make it more applicable for the different regions. So that is always for me an interesting question. And I would also like to make sure that we see your progress, and I might be able to get that towards our colleagues at the ESPON program. We have some nice remarks, which I would also like to
Please do.
Tell you, of course. Great to see the territorial agenda objectives replied in your cross-border region, so thanks for the insight. And that is said more often, thanks for the insights. For me, we spoke about it being a novi area, and you also said the national government needs, needs to get involved or needs to be in the game. And that, I feel, is one of the insights that is also very important. For the Netherlands, it's always been very common, fighting the water together since decades or ages. I don't even remember how long, that we have a multi-layer governmental cooperation. But as said, when we talk about the strategy, we've appointed different areas as being specific areas where the national involvement needs to be applied. And this is one of the areas, and that is, for me, you work on cross-border cooperation specifically. I have colleagues working on spatial planning, on making all these different layers and combining the different, problems, actually, we need to solve. Of course, climate change, the turn towards renewable energy. But what specifically in this area does the national government add to the project?
No, it's, first of all, I said it's work in progress. That still applies. And it's also good to know that we gave this area a novi status, an area. But remember, then you also give it to the other side of the border. And this is a Dutch instrument. And it's very necessary not only to have the Dutch national different ministries involved, and we're working on that, and it goes on occasionally very well. It depends on what the issues are. If it goes on energy, on CO2, of infrastructure, it works pretty well. But in this area, we need the other side of the border, the national government and the Flemish government as well. Then it's very important not to emphasize on the novi instrument itself, but on the agenda, the local and regional agenda, and working from that on and making sure what is the importance of having you on board. And it helps very much if you talk this with your colleagues from departments, but also between ministers. And that has happened. And therefore you see now that different ministries in the Netherlands and in Flanders from the agenda, but also because the ministries want to get involved. But still work in progress.
Still work in progress.
It's very much by indicating giving the novi status to this area, the Dutch government put sort of like a spotlight on an area which previously was perceived, both by the government as well as locally, as more of a peripheral area. You know, it's somewhere on the border, and now all of a sudden the spotlight is on this area, and a lot of ministries decide, okay, there's something going on there, and they want to join that. They want to join the action. So that's for us is very important. Then for the cross-border part, it's exactly like Sebastian said. That at first our Flemish colleagues perceived this as, oh, that's some kind of Dutch thing. But then we discussed it, we talked about it, and within weeks they said, no, we want to join this. It has to be cross-border. So that took really very little convincing, at least on civil servant level. Yeah. Of course, getting it all formalized between the governments is much more complicated. But there's a positive flow on both sides of the borders to make use of this, the attention and the support that we're getting from the Dutch government in this area.
So you also, as a province, feel that it is indeed important that we as a national government
are
in the game, so to speak. There are more questions. The first question is, are there any linkages to the Interreg program?
The area has definitely linkages to the Interreg program, and we're trying to work with the Interreg program in order to achieve the better governance for this. We will working on a program and a project to improve the governance of the BGTC, and maybe also what wider. So that's something we work on currently, but also for different parts of things that happen in this area of North Support and also wider, there are all kinds of different Interreg programs.
Okay.
And of course the BGTC as an entity can apply for Interreg subsidies and can jointly also sort of co-finance projects in this. So that's sort of an edit.
It's important to note that it's not only Interreg what can help us here. If it means that we want to support also financially some different kind of regions, be it on the border or otherwise, there are also national instruments available, or also we work on. So the Dutch government is working on regio deals. It's still trying to work out. We had some trench before, but the new government is trying to implement a new phase, and this summer we'll set on the process on how to apply to that. So that's more from the national government, but of course Interreg is here very important in the cross-border area.
That's good. And a very specific question is, at a certain moment there was an obstacle reported by the port on the nationality of the boats providing maintenance to offshore windmills. Are there any updates on this issue?
Not that I know of. This is too specific for me.
Yeah, for me as well. I'm not familiar with this issue.
I'm sorry about that, Ricardo, wherever you are. I don't have a question on that. I get the message that, of course, my clothing is disturbing with the sound again. I'm sorry about that. We're entering the last couple of minutes of this meeting. Is there, again, a question to you or on the other side of the screen? Is there anything interesting, any instruments you would like to share? We would be very much obliged. And the same question to you. If there is one thing that you would say, this is going to be my priority for the next time, or this is going to be my focus, or this is going to be special the next couple of months on this project, and you would like to keep us informed about, what would it be?
It's a difficult question because the agenda is so broad and has so many issues. I don't want to to choose between them because they are all important. Some might be a bit smaller than others, but it's not the size in this case that matters. But there are quite important issues concerning energy, CO2, and lots of things to be gained in this area on both sides of the border. The area of North Sea produces a lot of CO2, and there are, from a technical point of view, quite a few things, ideas on how to deal with them. That needs to be dealt cross-border, and it's necessary that the governments of Flanders and the Netherlands decide that this is our goals. We support this very much because it requires a lot of investment, and I hope that this will be achieved in the coming years. And
do you see any clear opportunities there which you might grasp?
Yes, we see quite a lot. Between the different kind of businesses, ArcelorMittal on the Flemish side, but Dow Chemicals on the Dutch side, they cooperate already, but they need us to enhance their projects and their ideas much more further. But the border is in between, so we have to deal with them.
Okay.
But a lot of investment is necessary.
Yes.
Hopefully we'll get there.
That's good. The same question actually for you, Leo, which is quite a hard question, I know, but if you would really think this is the thing that needs attention in the coming time, or this is the area in which I see so much opportunity that I do hope that there's going to be attention for that or investment for that.
Well, I in the presentation I gave an example of the objectives that we're trying to achieve and the activities of the projects which are under each of these objectives. But we're starting now with, as a region, we're starting with a number of pilots on a smaller level in order to experiment, in order to gain some experience, and then move on to the more bigger ones. So we're starting with a number of pilots now, and now one of them will be a fast public transport bus linkage between along between Ghent and Terneuzen. Use of residual warmth from the industry cross-border to provide heating to a small town or a housing development complex. Those kind of pilots is 5 or 6 which we're now starting up in different sectors, which I hope will provide us some experience, some knowledge about, well, starting on a small scale and then moving up, scaling up, and trying to attack those bigger issues.
That sounds promising indeed. As extra information, a call for proposals for B solutions is now live. Border regions can apply to get support on this type of obstacles. We've already spoken about that. So yes, we are aware. Thank you for that information. And for everybody else, there is a link put down by Ricardo online. There's also the question, are there any plans in the Netherlands to launch a TA pilot action? We are actually at this point in a different border region executing some plans which come really close to the pilot action, and we will be using and sharing that information when possible. So I am in contact with my colleagues in the TIA pilot, for the territorial impact analysis, and we will be sharing information and hopefully contributing to the solutions that we come up with there. And the last question is, will the presentation be published? Well, in any sense, the presentation itself, I can make sure that it will be shared, and I will ask the organization here if this will be in some way online anywhere, but I will make sure that to everybody I've already sent the link to will get the presentation, so the possibility to get the presentation. So I will just ask the question there if anybody would like the presentation, so we will share the presentation itself. So I would like to ask both of you, are there any last remarks, anything you would like to share with the viewers in the home office or in the normal office?
Well, I hope they thought it very interesting. It's very interesting for me as well to join this event, and hopefully we can learn from each other, also in a more physical setting, so we have more interaction. Then it's also good to know from us to learn from you.
Yes, I very much agree on that. Any last words from you, Leo?
Well, one of the experiences with working together with our Flemish colleagues is it can be a lot of fun as well.
Yeah.
So that's important.
That's a good last word to end with, everybody. We have to have a lot of fun with each other as well, and we have to learn from each other. I hope we will, and I will make sure that I will somehow give everybody the opportunity to to get the presentation. We will share it, and I hope you've become a bit wiser as to what we are doing here at the cross-border regions, and I'm very much obliged that you were able to join us. Thank you very much. Thank you, Sebastian. Thank you, Leo.
Well,
Thank you.
all right.